Best of r/malicious compliance episode 129. Subscribe for Reddit videos daily. Make my son wear uncomfortable shoes so it's uniform. Get ready for the ugliest shoes you've ever seen. I found out my son was a genius, and the public schools around here are lacking. I put son into a private school, where I had the most difficult time ever finding all white shoes my son can wear. Then an announcement was made that some non-white was allowed. His feet are all wide and he has high arches. I searched until I found a pair I thought would work. High-end shoes, white with a small silver stripe, $90. After the first day of school, I got the letter that my son's shoes were unacceptable because they had to have uniformity in their pictures, and that he couldn't attend class without all white shoes. I went to Walmart and bought the only pair of white shoes they had close to his size. No wides were available and none of the shoes had arch support. Cue the malicious compliance. I sat my son down and asked if he remembered me talking to him about taking care of his uniforms when he played. Son: yes. Me: well, I want you to forget all of that with these shoes. I want you to make them as ugly as possible. Get red playground dust all over them, rub them in the grass to get grass stains, and purposefully scuff your shoes when you go on the stairs. Less than a month into the school year, those shoes looked like they'd been through a war. The school was stubborn though. They knew what I was doing and never confronted me. They knew he had a perfectly respectable pair of shoes at home, but had him in his atrocious, orange green gray shoes instead. Thank you. Next. Malicious compliance lowers productivity. I used to work for a local council, within their street works department, maintaining roads and footpaths etc. Our official hours were 7:30–1600 hours. A lot of the more conscientious employees or those that woke up early would get into work at least half an hour ahead of time and start work then. All road workers like to get their jobs done as soon as possible. Due to the fact that these people started work early and would often work through their break times or have shorter breaks, they would get finished early, around 14:30. They would then return to the depot, clean off their works vehicles and prepare for the next day. We would then leave early around 15:30 as we had finished all our assigned work for the day. One supervisor who was very corporately minded got wind of this and started docking people's wage. I'm a union rep at this time and try to have a reasonable conversation with him and get him to be a bit more flexible with his thinking, as senior management didn't have a problem with it. Obviously it didn't happen. So I said to the supervisor, if we have to obey that rule we will obey all the rules. Workers only starting at 7:30. The depot is chaos as now instead of 50 workers getting their vehicles and materials over an hour and a half period, they all try to get them at once. Also productivity dropped further as the workers started taking their full breaks etc. Supervisor is in charge of monitoring productivity and starts trying to punish workers for the drop. I as union rep am asked to attend these meetings and help the workers. Naturally I agree. When in the meetings I explain calmly and clearly the reason for the drop in productivity. The supervisor tries to bully the workers and myself and I then ask him, so let me get this straight. You're trying to punish us for obeying the rules? He stutters and mumbled and says this meeting is finished. After this the department had to start paying for more overtime do that the jobs that needed doing as they were no longer being done. Thank you. Next. You want a free pen? Okay. Short story but a little funny. Hope to brighten your day. So I work at a certain red store with a white dog, and it's located very close to the public trolley line, one that comes all the way from downtown. As a result we get some homeless people wandering about sometimes. They sometimes scare other customers, but unless they do anything to provoke anyone we can't just kick them out. So an older, questionable looking lady with a large straw hat comes up to my register and asks to borrow a pen. However she doesn't realize she is holding her own and I spot it. I say okay and hand her my pen from my register. She then proceeds to walk away to go shopping, or whatever they do in the store, never returning it. As expected, my current customer whom I was ringing up asked, don't you want your pen back? Me nah, I knew she wasn't going to give it back. I gave her one without ink. Thank you. Next. You didn't ask me to do it, so I didn't. This isn't my story, but one of my mum's. It's not that extreme, but I think it's pretty amusing. When her and my dad were first living together, she would always do all of his laundry for him, mostly to save time and water etc. He grew up always having his laundry done for him, so he didn't really know how to do it. My mum got fed up of always doing his laundry for him, so one day she asked him if he could pitch in and do his own laundry for once. My dad got a little defensive and told her, I never asked you to do it. So, from that day on, she stopped doing his laundry. Simple as that. A week or so later, my dad came up to her and asked where all of his clean clothes were. My mum replied, I dunno, wherever you left them. Probably in that pile over there, she said, pointing to his pile of dirty laundry. My dad got defensive again, saying what? In an irritated tone. My mum calmly replied, you didn't ask me to wash your clothes, so I didn't. He always did all of his own laundry after that, lol. It got the message across. Thank you. Next. Mom told me to leave, so I did. Law enforcement got involved and she lost everything. This happened when I was 15. My mom was, let's be real, she probably still is, a mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive narcissist. Some highlights are when she was teaching my twin sister and I to read at the age of 4 or so. It was around 2 AM and my sister was having trouble learning, so my mother's solution was to beat her with a sandal every time she got a flashcard wrong. Same thing happened when my mother had me transcribe an essay she had written to my handwriting when I was 7. Every time I started a letter from the wrong position, like starting a capital M from the bottom line, she would beat me with one of her Birkenstocks. This too happened later at night, so when I got too delirious for the exhaustion and pain, she would drag me by the neck and literally throw me into a cold shower to wake me up so we could more easily continue the waking nightmare. When I was 13, I told her to wanted to live with my dad. They were divorced, and she told me she didn't care what I did after I turned 18. I later figured out that this was because the child support stopped at age 18. No. Fast forward to age 15. Our relationship was understandably strained. We had guests and she liked to use guests as a way of controlling our behavior through shame. It's easier to be an angsty teenager when your grown-up friends from church aren't watching and judging everything you do. This make it easier for her to pretend to be a firm but loving mother, all while slipping in sideways comments like velvet daggers. Well, I decided I wasn't going to subject myself to the whole thing and spent the day outside in the woods nearby. We lived in the mountains at the time, so it was less than 100 feet from the house. When I saw our guests had left, I went to go back inside. My mother, perhaps unhappy at being denied a day-long emotional abuse routine, told me I wasn't welcome and that I should leave. My 15-year-old brain heard her words and knew that she only meant for a little while, but it also recognized that failed to specify an intimate frame at all. So, I hiked a couple miles to a friend's house and asked if I could spend a couple days there. When my friend's dad found out that I was there and why, he was pissed and said I could stay as long as I needed. I didn't go home that evening, or the next. My mom became concerned and contacted law enforcement to report me missing. This is a big deal for several reasons. We lived in the mountains on a national park, so it was a very real possibility that I had been attacked by a wild animal, become injured while hiking, drowned, or been kidnapped. Nobody knew of my mother's abusive tendencies or the squalor and neglect my sister and I lived in. Most importantly, the law enforcement was the local park rangers with which she worked daily. They immediately contacted my dad's side of the family to see if I had turned up there or contacted them. They promptly freaked the fuck out and came to my house with lawyers on standby. They then hired dogs to track my scent, and then everyone freaked out because the dogs tracked me to a nearby river where my trail died because the dogs couldn't pick up any more scent. Over the next couple days there were people going in and out of my house, rangers, lawyers, my family, etc. And several noticed the overpowering scent of cleaning chemicals, but only the lawyer considered why a clean house would reek of chemicals. La started to canvass the nearby woods and neighborhood. My friend's dad came to me and asked if there was somewhere else I could stay. He told me that he wouldn't kick me out, didn't want to have to lie to the police or let the dogs on his property. My friend and I figured we'd just go camping for a week or so, but instead I looked up my dad's side of the family and called, and they picked me up right away. Understandably, everyone had questions. When I told them what was happening, the lawyers, horrified, pounced. A judge issued an emergency change of custody and prevented her from gaining custody until she underwent a psych eval and therapy, which my mother would never allow. The rangers, equally horrified, completely shunned my mother, and she eventually lost her job. Since she was only allowed to live on the park because she worked there, so she was kicked out of her house. My friend's father and the trackers were members of the local community and churches, and they too shunned my mother. She lost her job, her house, her church, and her friends, all because she told me to leave, and I did. TL. Doctor, mom told me to leave the house. When I didn't come back, she called her and reported me missing. When law got involved, my mother's abuse and neglect came to light, and she lost her job with local law, her house which she had through the local law, and her friends. Judge finally awarded custody of us kids to my dad, so she lost her child support payments too. Edit for clarity. I'm 32 now, this happened a while ago. Edit. I wasn't clear and didn't want to make it longer. When my dad's family got involved, they were able to reach an agreement where I would leave with them for a time, but my sister stayed. I had to go back to my mom's for a short while, but the judge issued an emergency change of custody, and my sister and I went to live with our dad. My sister and I have been in therapy and she is teaching now. Life isn't perfect, but it's better. Edit. People keep asking about the chemicals. The house was normal trashed. My mother kept an untrained dog and the carpet was soaked with dog feces and urine. The few times we had guests, we would have to crawl around the dog's potty spot and clean it up and make the house smell good. My mom freaked out when she realized that rangers and CPS might come round. She did a deep clean of the house before reporting me missing because she couldn't afford to have them realize what they were walking on. Thank you. Next. Okay, I'll only wear the provided uniform. So my local government workplace decided to introduce a strict uniform a few years ago. We always had a dress code, no jeans, no shorts, no exposed midriff, and if you didn't comply with it, words would be had. So most people were sensible and dressed for work accordingly. But sadly, according to management, that needed to change. The uniform chosen was awful. Black skirt or trousers of your own. Fine so far. White blouse and jazzy neck scarf for ladies. White shirt and jazzy tie for gentlemen. These were provided for us. Staff had to wear the scarf or tie despite it being a strangle risk. We work with the public who are sometimes confrontational, and even our lanyards had to be the special breakaway type in case we were attacked. Suddenly that risk was forgotten/ignored. Not to mention unnecessary gendering of the uniform. I asked for a tie and was refused. Enter the MC. We did not plan or coordinate this, but somehow everyone in every satellite office came to the same conclusion. We will wear the uniform you provide. We will only wear the uniform you provide. Now, being a local government, the budget was pretty non-existent. So the quality of the shirts was awful. Paper thin, see-through and cheap. Badly sized. People having to request several sizes bigger than they wear from regular shops in order for them to fit. Full-time staff, who almost always worked 5 days per week, were allocated 2 shirts. Part-time staff were allowed 1 shirt, no matter how many days their shifts were spread over. Now either one of 2 things will happen here. Either the shirts will become very grubby after a day of work, and you turn up the next day in a grubby shirt which looks very unprofessional, or you wash it after every shift, in which case it will become worn, frayed and even more thin and see-through after a few months, which looks very unprofessional, and will need replacing after a few months, which there was no budget for. After a very scruffy looking year, and several requests from the 80 or so staff for new shirts, the rules were relaxed somewhat so that staff can wear any plain white, black, or monochrome clothes that they wish. And suddenly, everyone looks much nicer, more professional and coordinated. Thank you. Next. Let my co-workers clock off early for a company event but make me work my full shift because I am not attending. Okay, it'll be the least productive hour you've ever seen from me. So, my company occasionally does outings for us as a reward for our hard work. When they do these outings, they always have everyone stop working earlier than usual. I am currently working from home to avoid getting sick, and declined attending the event this time around to continue to protect myself. I'm in one of the high-risk groups. However, when I went to confirm with my boss that the event was today and we were clocking off early, they replied and said because I was not attending I would have to work my full shift. That's pure and utter fucking bullshit. The reward for our hard work is not the outing alone, but being able to clock earlier than usual. So, I'm not getting rewarded either way, while the rest of my coworkers do. Lovely. I tried raising concerns about this unfair treatment to my boss, but never received a reply. It is now past the time everyone else clocked off, so I am likely not getting one. My solution? Do the least amount of work possible in the time I have left. I am usually a very productive employee, but after this shit, nope. They can fire me if they want. At this point, I could give a rat's ass.